business of space is entering its most transformative decade. Yet, once dominated by a handful of government agencies, it's now an open arena powered by private investment, commercial innovation, and international cooperation. From satellites delivering broadband to remote regions to lunar missions backed by global consortia, the boundaries between public and private, national and international are blurring fast. But opportunity also brings complexity. Thousands of satellites are crowding low orbit, regulation is struggling to keep pace, and the question of sustainability in space has never been more urgent. How can we ensure this new frontier remains safe, profitable, and accessible to all? Well, to discuss this, I'm joined by Dr. Christian Feitinger, Executive Director of the International Astronautical Federation, an organisation uniting agencies, academia and industry under one global umbrella. Together, we'll explore the next great frontier for both business and sustainability. Well, Dr. Feitinger, thank you so much for speaking to us. Can we start with some fundamentals? The IAF, for anybody perhaps who might be living on a different planet, pun intended, could you explain a bit about the mission and the objectives of the organisation?
Well, thank you very much for having me. The International Astronautical Federation is a unique platform. It's an association that was created in 1951 by just a few societies, was during the times of the Cold War, with the goal to connect space people, because at that time, space people from the East and the West, everything was very secret, nobody could meet each other, talk to each other, and by creating this platform and by creating the International Astronautical Congress, which today is the biggest gathering of the space family, for the first time it was possible that people, specialists in space from East and West, could meet and could exchange. And since then, of course, we have continued our mission of connecting all space people for a sustainable future. And we are very proud that today we have developed this association in the major global space advocacy organization with almost 600, more than 600 members now, actually, from 82 countries. So it's a truly global association, a global family. And the International Astronautical Congress has equally developed to an event that is bringing together up to and sometimes even more than 10,000 people every year in a different place around the world.
And the influence of the private sector is particularly interesting because I think for decades, many people took a great interest in space developments, but it was always considered a public sector, a government-led initiative. Now, of course, the business, the economics of space has become a very tangible thing, hasn't it?
Definitely. I mean, looking back in the history of the IAF development, actually, as I said, the federation was created by societies from one per country. And then at some point in time, the IAF decided to open up to other categories. And then, of course, the government sector came in with space agencies and space offices. And now, if you look in the last 10, 15 years, of course, the most or the strongest growing category within our membership are companies, is industry. And these are, of course, the big ones, but also the smaller ones, the startups. Today, industry is really the backbone of space development today. A tendency that has, I think, been initiated in the US, but is now kind of going everywhere. Even if you look to China, there is a very booming commercial space sector developing everywhere around the world. So we see it also within the federation. Industry makes up almost 50% of our membership, and their contribution is significant, of course, to the development of space.
And does your organisation ever find itself in a conundrum? Because, of course, not just businesses, but also countries naturally compete with one another. In fact, you know, one of the healthy byproducts of that is it drives innovation. But at the same time, you've got to make sure that governments, businesses also collaborate too?
Exactly. Well, this kind of balance, I would call it, between competition and cooperation is the secret of success, I think. Without competition, there is no big progress, let's say, but huge space programs today, they cannot be done in isolation. You need to have cooperation platforms, and especially today when emerging space countries are playing more and more a role within space. I mean, many years ago, for some countries, space was something totally not interesting, not existing. Today, everybody understands that space is important for socio-economic development, and therefore they want to be part of it. And the established space countries take that up, embrace them sometimes, invite them, cooperate. So this is important, but also competition is important in order to kind of push the boundaries as much as quickly as possible.
Now, I spoke to a few people ahead of this interview who said to me, if you're going to speak to Dr. Weitinger, make sure you ask him about space junk, space debris. Yeah. So could you give us the sort of truthful perspective on that? Is it a big problem? If so, what form does it take? Do we have all sorts of effectively litter floating around above us? And if so, how do we solve that problem and make sure that problem doesn't become an ongoing issue into the future?
Yes, this is indeed today, of course, one of the major issues and challenges, I would say, for the global space community. Because if you look into the tendency of number of space objects that are put in space year by year over the last few years, it's exponentially growing. I mean, it's just last year, thousands, tens of thousands of new space objects appearing in space. And of course, certain orbits are getting fuller and fuller. And I'm not talking even about the junk, meaning the debris that is really already existing. These are small items, millimeter size, up to bigger non-functional spacecrafts even around anymore. And they all can pose a significant threat to the usage of an orbit. Today, if an orbit becomes unusable by creating a big crash between two spacecrafts, for instance, the global community will feel this very strongly. The problem today is that there are many different groups discussing space traffic management. Space situational awareness is something that is very important and is driven by leading space countries, the US, certainly also Europe, China. But there is no, I would say, globally binding rules yet. Countries are establishing their own rules in terms of lifetime in orbit of satellite that is becoming out of fuel, out of operation. But there is no globally unique set of rules that are followed, and it is very difficult, as it is in space. In many cases, regulations follow reality with a kind of time delay, and we are already in a very serious reality, I would say. The point here is really to create a community that is discussing and that is establishing rules. The UN is working on this very intensively, of course, in sustainable development discussions. The US is bringing together certain rules, of course, and others are joining this in. China has very strict rules also in terms of what requirements are put forward to satellites. But the driving force will be if there can be established a business case. Because as long as industry doesn't see a business in removing debris or kind of any measures that would avoid debris, it will be very difficult to force everybody with rules that are not yet available on a global scale. There are companies, there are countries that are working already on projects of active debris removal, meaning spacecraft that can grab another non-functional spacecraft and deorbit it. Sounds a bit like science fiction. It most probably will have its importance in the future, but that doesn't save you from all the small pieces that are around still already, and all these projects are still in a very, very early phase.
It's very interesting what you say there about one part of that community being entrepreneurs. I mean, space entrepreneurs. Companies focused on cleaning up space junk, companies focused on, as you say, traffic management in space. I mean, who'd have thought that we'd be talking about traffic management in space just a few years ago? Are you seeing more and more of these space entrepreneurs starting up?
Oh yes, of course. Just coming back to what you said about the space traffic management, I mean, this is something, if you look back to the early days of aviation, also nobody thought that you would need to have flight traffic management, actually. But today, I mean, the airspace is so congested that one couldn't imagine doing it without. And space is following exactly the same thing. The European Space Agency, for instance, has a very interesting initiative here as well. It's called Clean Space, where voluntarily companies and other agencies are signing up to a certain number of rules that will assure that space debris is minimized. But coming to your question about the entrepreneurs, yes, as I said before, this is a tendency I think that has started in the US, where startups were created, and there was a very positive, and there is a rather positive financing environment in the US, which is not so much available, or was not so much available in Europe and in other countries, but is developing now. And of course, every success story which you read about a startup and a small company that succeeds in order to develop, I don't know, even a launch, a satellite, whatever, stimulates others to follow the same pattern. Therefore, it's also so important to educate and to stimulate the young generation, because they are the ones that are brave enough to jump into this quite risky business, I would say. But if you look at assessments of the development of space economy in the future, it would be stupid not to consider this as an investment area for investors. And if there is money available, people will go into this sector and build their companies.
So new investment opportunities, new businesses, as we've spoken about, but also emerging nations, emerging regions. I think many people will be familiar with the US, with Russia, with China, possibly with the European Space Agency, but you're obviously here in Baku. Tell us about this region and your views on perhaps how you think this region could develop in this space business going forward.
I think that's the major shift which we have seen in the recent years, that emerging countries are getting really involved in space. Why? At the very beginning, most probably it was only use of space data for security, for disaster management. That's where it starts. But if you look today, for instance, at the US Artemis Accords, which countries are signing up to an exploration cooperation, actually, you think, well, do they really want to be part of exploring with humans kind of outer space? And that is really amazing because it tells you that space, and especially space exploration, does not only have socioeconomic benefits, but also pushes and inspires the next generation. And that's where you need to start in order to build up a functional space ecosystem for the future. Coming to the region here, of course, this is a splendid example. Azerbaijan is a splendid example. We've had the pleasure to organize, together with Azakosmos, the agency, the International Astronautical Congress here in 2023. This started, of course, 3-4 years before, when Azerbaijan took the decision to bid for it. And for us even, it was a surprise, because nobody heard about, okay, this region and space was not really kind of very clear. But the effect it had is amazing if you look today. I mean, first of all, the Congress itself mobilized all the resources of the country, and not only the country, but also the region. Everybody talked about space. The young generation got inspired.
Uzbekistan too playing a role.
Coming exactly to this one. What we see today, for instance, is that Azerbaijan, when submitting abstracts for our annual Congress, is amongst the top 3 to 5 in terms of number of submitting abstracts. That means that the stimulus that was given by this International Astronautical Congress here in Baku has brought a legacy. So the young generation sees there is a future in space for me. The country is supporting it strongly. I submit my papers, I get selected, I go to the next IEC, I meet people, I have career opportunities. And other surrounding countries in the region are looking, of course, at Azerbaijan and say, what is possible in Azerbaijan may be possible in my country as well. And that's how I interpret the initiative of Uzbekistan to bid for an IEC in 2028. And amazingly, they got it. So in 2028, the IEC will come back to this region, to Samarkand in Uzbekistan. And I'm sure Uzbekistan is very closely monitoring the development in Azerbaijan and seeing that it pays off to invest in space, to develop a space ecosystem in the country. And by doing so, they will again stimulate other regional countries here. And this is just one region of the world. I mean, you have Latin America, you have Africa, you have many emerging space ecosystems still, which we in the IEF are trying to nurture, to support, and to stimulate their activeness in development.
You sound very positive, very hopeful about the future, not just for this region, but for the world as a whole when it comes to space exploration and the development of the space economy. When we look back in 5-10 years' time at this period now, what do you think will be our reflections, the key achievements you think are most likely to occur over the next 12-24 months?
Well, I think we are at the moment in one of the most interesting and exciting times if you talk about space, because the developments are now rapidly. We've seen in the last maybe 20 years well, stagnation is maybe a bit too much to say, of course, but the development of human space flight, I mean, the big excitement with landing on the moon, but then, okay, this was not a sustainable thing, really. Then, of course, the development of low Earth orbit infrastructure, the International Space Station, the Chinese space station now. This has become a bit routine for people. People were excited some 15 years ago when there was a group of astronauts launched to space or coming back. Today, it's so much routine already. But now we are going into a next step, and the next step is driven certainly by commercial space as well. In the US, but also in other countries. What will be really exciting is to go forward or back to the moon again, and see how humanity can really settle on the moon on a sustainable basis, not only to visit there, but really make the moon an outpost that can contribute to the economic development of the Earth. And then, of course, a perspective of going beyond, going towards Mars. This is exciting. Of course, other areas and other fields like Earth observation, like communication, they are so well established today already that this is not maybe raising this big excitement. Also, the achievements and the benefits for humanity are equally important, if not even more important. Today, in the times of climate change, where catastrophes driven by climate change are becoming more and more frequently, the existence and the provision of reliable data to everybody, not only as an asset for the big space countries, but also to emerging countries, is of key importance in order to avoid real catastrophes or to kind of counteract catastrophes. But as I said before, exploration, and specifically human exploration, has this very special touch because it inspires the youth. You can inspire the youth by saying, okay, we get so many terabyte of data about the Earth per day. Yeah, that's not really something which people can identify themselves, but telling them that in the future you maybe also be able to go to space, see the Earth from outside, maybe go to the moon or be part of the settlement on Mars. I mean, that's what people really excites. Not to talk about, of course, the very exciting activities that are also ongoing in looking for extraterrestrial life, because that is also something which is an eternal question of humanity. Are we alone? Are we the only ones? So there are really exciting things, and I'm sure when in 5-10 years from now, looking back to this time, I think we will say that were the time where really key initiatives were kind of done, decided, and put on the right track in order to achieve things which we today cannot even imagine, most probably.
Wow, fascinating stuff. Dr. Weitinger, thank you so much for joining us on the show. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that is all for this edition of World Business Special from all of us here at AnewZ. Thanks for watching.